Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we are here to bring you more knowledge, more light, and more love. We're back with another lecture episode. I thought it would be great to follow up the interview that we just did last week with Gabriel Kennedy about Robert Anton Wilson with an actual lecture from Robert Anton Wilson. It'll be a good addendum to last week's episode because he is, like Gabriel pointed out, a counterculture icon that isn't often as noticed as people like Timothy Leary and Ram Dass and all of the other influential people of that era. So I thought it'd be cool to just hear the words from the man himself, because just like every other lecture episode, the lecturer, or in some cases the person being interviewed, has left this dimension. Because if Bob was still here, I would be interviewing him directly, much like Gabriel Kennedy did. This incredible book, Chapel Perilous, the only biography of Robert Anton Wilson. He was on last week. What an episode. But now, again, like I said, we're going to listen to Robert Anton Wilson himself talk to us. And with us, as she always is with so many other lecture episodes, with me now as a guest co-host is Brynn Anderson of Vital Force Herbs. Hello, Brynn.
Hello, Jake.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been an incredibly great year so far. 2025. Keep saying it. We're still alive. It's our time to thrive. I stand by those words. I think I said them to you while you were here last time.
Yes, indeed. Happy 2025.
We're still going. I mean, it's now moving into February, and there's this galactic alignment, which you can feel this energy, people. Let's just talk about this for a second. But just want to say thank you for being here, Brynn, as you always are on these lecture episodes and other ones, beyond the news, of course.
Absolutely.
You're back. But let's talk about the galactic alignment that's happening right now.
Have you seen the planets out?
I have.
Pretty
That's
amazing.
the thing. It looks pretty amazing. You can see the planets. You can see the alignment. I mean, you can trace the path of the direction. You can see it. More importantly, and interestingly, I think the energy of the experience is what's unique. It's very palpable to me as an energy sensitive person. It feels like full moon energy or some type of lunar energy, but different. It's a different type of cosmic energy. It's this alignment energy. I don't know what it means, but it feels really good. It has that cosmic quality that gives you that understanding. It opens up your awareness and helps you realize that there's so much life out there. There's so much going on out in the universe, and we're just like this part of it. We have incredible value, infinite value as humans, and the earth, my God, our solar system, everything, the galaxy. But there's so much out there that when alignments like this happen, big cosmic activities happen, it helps you remember that. Like, hey, wow, there is some stuff going on out there. And there is information, perceptions, knowledge that is just so, immense compared to what we've experienced so far on planet Earth. Now, this cycle. But really cool stuff, really interesting, this alignment. Brynn, what do you think about the alignment?
It's been beautiful to go out and witness it every night. I know there's a lot of other astrological alignments, conjunctions, oppositions, planets that haven't been near each other lately. And you can definitely feel that. It's also the beginning of the Lunar New Year, so the year of the wood snake this year. So it seems like the alignment is happening along with that. And then also here closer to Earth or on Earth rather, is Imbolc, which is the exact halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So I always feel like there's some energy there, that first beginning buds of spring, even though you can't see it yet, it's in the air. So I don't know, I feel like all the way from the Earth all the way out to the cosmos, there's a lot going on right now.
There is a lot of activity, and this alignment is a indicator of that. It signifies something. It's some sort of message to us in a way, showing us that we're on the right path. So, wow. And we're on the right path with this episode. But before we get into it, real quick, I have to do this every episode because there's so many new people that come on from all around the world. And maybe this is even their first episode. So I have to do this every time because we're still growing. We still need your help to get this information out there. We're trying to get around the world. Such good information. It needs to get around the world. This is how you can help. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcasts, click that button that connects us. So again, you know exactly what's going on. Tell a friend, word of mouth, spread the word, do the thing, help the show, help it grow. Tell all the people you know. I just made that up. That was
wow,
like
that was like Dr. Seuss, Shel Silverstein.
It was all of my great influences. And yes, please, word of mouth, it's so powerful. Bring people here. midnightonearth.com. And cannot neglect our sponsor, of course, because she's here right now. One of our great sponsors. We've had so many. She's here with us as a guest co-host. She's always helped the show and supported the show energetically. She's also supporting it in a different way with her company, Vital Force Herbs. Okay. So if you go to this website, Vital, VITAL, vitalforceherbs.com, you can go there and see what Brynn is all about. She has these blends, these incredible blends, these tinctures, all organic materials, her own recipes that address a lot of different wellness situations that you might find yourself in. Most importantly, I think, is the crystal infusion, which it's all speculation, of course, perhaps. I'm not sure. But there's something about the crystal infusion that I believe amplifies and works with the plants, the plant spirits that are like in these blends, because you have all of these plant spirits working together, in certain cases, grounded calm, deepest dreams, immune defense, lung fortifier, so much going on there. So go there, vitalforceherbs.com. We have a discount code MIDNIGHT, MIDNIGHT. Put that in the discount code box at checkout. 30% off any order as little as one bottle. So do that. Go there, vitalforceherbs.com. And remember, when you support Brynn, you're supporting this show. Vitalforceherbs.com, discount code midnight, 30% off any order, free shipping. Okay, check it out. People around the world that listen to Midnight on Earth, we love you so much. We've learned so much over the years. And just last week, we had a guest on, Gabriel Kennedy, who wrote the first official biography of Robert Anton Wilson, the only biography of Robert Anton Wilson. So before we listen to this lecture from the year 2000, and just like any other person that is a guest on the show, whether they are here in the time stream with me or if they have graduated, it doesn't matter. We still read the bio. So here we go. Robert Anton Wilson was an American author, futurist, and self-described agnostic mystic. Recognized within Discordianism as an episcopos, Pope and Saint, Wilson helped publicize Discordianism through his writings and interviews. Wilson described his work as an attempt to break down conditioned associations, to look at the world in a new way with many models recognized as models or maps, and no one model elevated to the truth. His goal was to try to get people into a state of generalized agnosticism, not agnosticism about God alone, but agnosticism about everything. Question everything. In addition to writing several science fiction novels, Wilson also wrote nonfiction books on extrasensory perception, mental telepathy, metaphysics, paranormal experiences, conspiracy theories, drugs, and what Wilson called quantum psychology. His Maybe Logic inspired the creation of the Maybe Logic Academy. Quote, the Berkeley mob once called Leary and me the counterculture of the counterculture. I'm some kind of antibody in the New Age movement. My function is to raise the possibility, hey, you know, some of this stuff might be bullshit. And that's why we're listening to it, because we love the guy. And he has done an incredible amount of work. So this lecture is from the year 2000. So he graduated 2007. This is towards the end of his life. Brynn, do you know a lot about Robert Anton Wilson?
I cannot say I know a lot about him, no.
The Illuminatus trilogy was one of those books that, you know, was considered like...
Sure, yeah. I mean, I definitely know his name and familiar, but I can't say I'm a deep study. Yes.
In the pre-internet days. So. Okay, people, so here's the deal. If you've never listened to a lecture episode before, Brynn and I are listening to this with you. We're taking notes. And at the end of the lecture, stick around because we will be talking about what we learned. Taking notes together. It's me, you, Bob, and Brynn. We're together. Our energies are coalescing in the quantum realm as we learn together and listen to this. So here we go, people. I guess, do you have anything else to say, Brynn? Are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go.
You're ready? She's ready to rock. She's got her pen. You got your notepad, right?
I do. I have my pens. That's pens, many colors of pens, and my notepad and my tea. Ready?
You're ready. Okay, so here we go, people. Robert Anton Wilson from the year 2000. What is this about? We're going to find out together. It's just him. Off the cuff, people. Here we go.
Here he is, ready to fire the cosmic trigger, Mr. Robert Anton Wilson.
I used to get billed as a philosopher and stand-up comic, but my legs are bothering me more in the recent years, so now I'm a philosopher and sit-down comic. It's the best I can do. I don't know how the hell I can follow that last act. I do not have a wall of vaginas. I don't even have a single vagina. I do have a willy, however, which means that I might become Pope someday. You know, every church I know anything about has got some women clergy critters. I avoid the term clergy persons because it's redolent of human chauvinism. So I say clergy critters and Congress critters and so on. But almost everybody has got women clergy critters, except the Catholic Church. And that drag queen in the Vatican just a few weeks ago once again reiterated, a woman cannot be a priest in the Catholic Church. He didn't quite explain it, but it all comes down to a woman, the priest symbolizes Christ. And you can't symbolize Christ unless you got a willy, which means that the most important thing about Jesus Christ was that he had a willy. Many people think the most important thing about Jesus, those who admire him, think the most important thing about Jesus was that he taught a philosophy of love and forgiveness. A lot of other people taught that before him, like Buddha, for instance. Those who don't like Jesus so much point out he was the one who invented eternal damnation. You would find a word about that throughout the Old Testament. Nowhere do they threaten anybody with eternal damnation. Jesus went around threatening everybody with eternal damnation, which means that for 2,000 years, children have had nightmares, night anxieties. It's probably fucked up more heads than any other single doctrine. But if you're going to symbolize Jesus according to the Pope, you got to have a willy. I've done a lot of meditating on this. Why do you need a willy? Was that really the most important thing about Yeshua ben Yosef, to give him his correct name? You know, in Hebrew, his name was Yeshua ben Yosef. He's only called Jesus Christ by those illiterate shitheads who do the televangel hours. Yeshua ben Yosef probably had a willy, as far as we know, although he said some have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake, and maybe he was one of them. He does look rather effeminate in most portraits, but the portraits are all based on imagination. Anybody going around with a pink dress on and long hair looks a little bit effeminate, you got to admit. But I think that's what Freud called the return of the repressed. Catholicism is the most patristic religion in the Western world, although it hardly begins to compare with Islam in that respect. But anyway, I think the real reason you need a willy to be a Catholic priest is that the Catholic Church has many roots in the early pagan fertility cults. For instance, they borrowed Christmas from the cult of Mithra. They borrowed Easter from another pagan spring celebration. Halloween, even the Jehovah's Witnesses know that's a pagan holiday. And the dead and resurrected God, that's an old pagan theme. Osiris, Dionysus, Adonis. There are dozens and dozens of dead and resurrected gods, all representing the death of the crops in the winter and their rebirth in the spring. And part of these early fertility religions was what anthropologists call phallus worship, or willy worship, to put it in the vernacular. And this seems to have been connected with the idea the greater the size of the willy, the greater the divinity indwelling, which is why if you seriously get into archaeology and ancient history, you will find Osiris, Dionysus, Priapus, Pan. Most of the great male fertility gods do not have normal-sized willies. They have 3 times as much as the average actual male human. They sort of look like a chest of drawers with the middle drawer pulled all the way out. And you don't find this in popular books on ancient history because they're afraid of shocking the pants off the public. But if you really study the scholarly works, you'll find hundreds of these ithyphallic divinities, as they're called. I think the Catholic Church, when they took so much paganism over and incorporated, they also took the doctrine that the willy is especially sacred, and the bigger the willy, the more sacred it is. And that's why a woman can't be a Catholic priest. Any women in the audience who are brokenhearted by that, let me remind you that being a Catholic priest is a pretty dreary business. Outside of altar boys, you're not supposed to mess around with anyone else. But at least this explains why the selection of the Pope is wrapped in so much secrecy. You know, all the cardinals retire into a room, the doors are locked. Nobody knows what goes on in there. Eventually smoke comes out, and that means they've made their decision. Nobody knows how they make their decision. I figure it's sort of like the way they cast the lead in a porn movie. They all lay it down on the table, and somebody goes around with a ruler. The bigger the willy, the better equipped you are to be the head of a church, which is based on the idea that the willy makes you superior to anybody who doesn't have a willy. And if that isn't the basis of Catholic teaching, I don't know what the hell is. This is one of my many heresies. I try to think logically, and the result of that is most people think I'm a satirist. But consider the difference between Federal Reserve notes and counterfeit money. I have been meditating on that ever since I read Ezra Pound's cantos at the age of 18, as many cantos as they were then. He wrote more later. But studying Pound's Cantos got me very much involved in this question of why do Federal Reserve notes pass as money? Well, as far as I've read all sorts of explanations. I followed this argument through the pages of economics journals, books, and so on. I never found a reasonable explanation except the one I made up myself. If you or I or the mafia print a whole bunch of money in our basement, no matter how good it looks, it's not real money. You know why? Because we don't have a magic wand. When the Federal Reserve prints money, prints paper, they wave a magic wand over it and it becomes money. If you don't have the magic wand, it's a counterfeit. And I have yet to see any book on economics that gives an explanation that makes as much sense as that one. Just like I've never found a book on theology explaining why women can't be Catholic priests that makes as much sense as the one I thought up myself. Maybe I should get the new title, Defender of Part of the Faith. If you can believe that the willy is really central to holiness and that the Federal Reserve really has a magic wand and every other money is not real money, then the world begins to make sense. If you can't believe either of those doctrines, it looks like a large part of the world is run by raving lunatics or outright charlatans. And it's hard to... I forget what the national debt is right now. It doubled, it tripled during the Reagan years, and it's been increasing even faster ever since. Not million, 5.6 trillion. And you know, when they started raising it dramatically under the reign of Roosevelt II, all the liberal intellectuals kept telling us, don't worry about it, we only owe the money to ourselves. I was raised on that line of bullshit. We only owe the money to ourselves. That's not true. We owe the national debt to the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank, of whom the owners are unknown according to the law establishing the Federal Reserve. You can't find out who owns the Federal Reserve because under the law that's never to be revealed. The president may know, but even the president doesn't know. Actually, he only knows half of them. The president appoints half of them and they appoint the other half. We don't have any idea, and that's only the board of directors. We don't have any idea who owns the stock in the Federal Reserve. We owe $5.6 trillion to these bastards and we don't even know who they are. But don't worry, they have a magic wand and their money is real money and we got to pay the interest. If anybody else printed all that money, it would be a if a bunch of anarchists got together and printed currency and distributed it without interest, that would be counterfeiting. The Federal Reserve is perfectly legal and can collect interest on the paper they print because they have a magic wand which turns paper into money. Now because of saying things like this, I've got a reputation as an atheist. Some people think I don't believe the willy has any special magic, and I don't really believe in the magic wand that the Federal Reserve has. Actually, although I have my doubts on that subject, I am not an atheist. I used to be an atheist, but I had to give up. I discovered I didn't have anything to say during a blowjob. You know, random chance. That just does not convey the gravity of the situation. Those of you who have read my book, Cosmic Trigger, know, a lot of you. Hey, that's very flattering. You all know what happened on July 23rd, 1973. That was the day I achieved contact with an extraterrestrial from Sirius, or started hallucinating like mad, depending on which way you want to look at it. I have varied between both theories over the years. But I just found out recently, since I'm a student of synchronicity, this one really struck me. July 23rd, 1973 was also the birthday of Monica Lewinsky. Who, that is important. I regard her as one of the most important figures in American political history because she kept the United States Congress arguing for over a year about whether having a blowjob in the White House was cause for impeachment. Apparently, they thought that George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, and so on, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower. None of them ever had a blowjob in the White House. Now, I don't know whether I believe that or not, but I'm just enough afraid it might be true that if anybody nominates me for president, I want you to know right away I won't run. The idea of 8 years without a blowjob is it's just absolutely too much. I just can't face the thought. So I do not want to be president. So even if the Republicans did not succeed in getting Clinton impeached, at least they persuaded a lot of us we don't want to be president. Pardon me, I needed a little water. This is water, it's not vodka, I wouldn't fool you. I think this is the only country in the world where the major legislative body could be tied up for over a year in debating about whether a blowjob is cause for impeachment or not. I can't imagine it happening in Amsterdam and France and England. I can't even imagine it happening in Ireland. I can't imagine it certainly. But then again, this is the only country in the world which has it's not the only country. It's the leading country in the world at imprisoning its own citizens. We have more people in prison in total than any other country in the world. We have more than all of Europe put together. And this is true both in terms of total numbers and percentages, and they're building more prisons faster all the time. I think this is absolute nonsense. All this money and time, what they should do is build a wall around the whole country and announce we're all under arrest. Well, why do it slice by slice, step by step? It's obviously what they're aiming at is to put us all under arrest, so why don't they do it in one step? You know, I used to read a lot of Kafka. I was convinced Kafka was the most brilliant, insightful analyst of the modern world of all contemporary. I like Joyce better, but Kafka seemed to me to get to the essence of the modern condition. But even Kafka, in his wildest pages, never imagined something like the piss police. We live in a country which is based on two documents, the Declaration of Independence, which is not a matter of law, but it's supposed to be the theory on which our country is based, and the Constitution, which is supposed to be the basis of our laws. And nowhere in either of those is there any suggestion that we're going to found a government that will go around prying into people's bladders to see what they've been doing lately. I can't imagine this happening in any other country. But lest I sound too cynical, I want to point out that I'm taking great interest in the current election campaign for the first time in an aeon or so. Yeah. Well, I went for a couple of decades without voting at all, and then after I moved to California, where they have a lot of interesting propositions on the ballot, I figured it's worth voting just to vote for some of the good propositions and vote against the bad ones. And then I voted for Proposition 215, which legalized marijuana for cancer and AIDS patients and other people. Yeah, well, that goes to show what good it does to vote. The majority of the people in California voted for that proposition, and as soon as Clinton heard about it, he said, well, I'm paraphrasing, but his general attitude was, fuck you, you think this is a democracy? You can't make laws, we make the laws. And they're still throwing people in jail in California for using marijuana to treat their cancers. And these are dying people. People in terrible agony are dying, and the government is dragging them in their wheelchairs into court. And I do not exaggerate. They have actually dragged people in wheelchairs into court and sentenced them. And this is because we live in a free democratic society where the people make the laws, except when the establishment doesn't like it. And then the attitude is, fuck you and your laws, we make our own laws. Well, as Jack McCoy said on Law and Order a couple of weeks ago, that's my favorite TV show. Don't ask me why. The number of surprise. I'm a writer myself, as some of you may have heard. There's a term that writers use, a paper dragon. A paper dragon is a surprise that doesn't make any sense. It only happens because the writer decided he wanted a surprise ending, or she wanted a surprise ending. On Law and Order, the surprise endings all make sense. They're all things that seem perfectly normal in police investigations and legal trials, and so these things all could happen. And I guess that's what I like about it. They continually surprise me, but not in ways that seem absurd, in ways that seem totally logical. But that's a digression. Jack McCoy recently lost a case against a millionaire family, one of whom had committed a murder. And they all got together and made up fake alibis and testified to one another. They got a team of lawyers, about 12 of them, to McCoy and his associate all alone. And of course, they won. And at the end of the show, McCoy's associate, Miss Carmichael, whose first name I never get clear, she's only been on the show for a few months. That's right, thank you, Abby Carmichael. She said, well, there are two laws, one for the rich and one for the poor. And Jack McCoy looks off into space and says, what law for the rich? Is there any law that controls the rich? I don't think there is. Well, there was a famous case here in New York about 60 years ago, more or less. A guy named Harry Thor, who was rich from having money. He was filthy, stinking rich. He was fucking rich. He was one of the richest people in the country. And he was not only jealous of the possibility his wife might ball another man after marrying him, he was insanely jealous of the possibility she might have done it before marrying him. And then he found some evidence she had an affair with her before she married him. Before she was married to this guy, she had an affair with an architect named Sanford White. And I presume there's a lot of New Yorkers here. I don't think you all came from out of town. You'll see Sanford White's work at Madison Square Garden. He designed that. You'll also see it in Greenwich Village. He designed the Washington Square Arch. He designed a lot of other great things around New York. Well, Harry Thor found out that Sanford White and his wife had been having an affair before he even met her, not only before he married her, before he even met her. And Harry Thor was the kind of insane, possessive person who couldn't stand the thought that his wife fucked somebody else even before she even saw him. And he brooded over it and brooded and brooded, and one day he walked into the restaurant on Madison Square Garden and he shot Harry Thor. He shot Sanford White in plain sight of about 100 or 200 witnesses. And guess how much prison time he served? 0, zilch. There is no law for the rich. And then there's DeLorean, the DEA, not my favorite government organization, but the DEA got him on videotape with 3 kilos of cocaine in his lap negotiating the price. Guess how much time DeLorean served? 0, zilch. Richard Nixon was accused of more goddamn crimes than any mafia family you can name. How much time did he serve? Zilch. Spiro Agnew was actually forced to resign and had to pay a fine, but guess how much prison time he served? Zilch. Do you believe, does anybody in the whole goddamn country believe a black kid from the ghetto with a box of cocaine in his lap on television, on video, would have gotten zilch in prison? He would have got 20 to life or something like that. There is no law for the rich. As a matter of fact, if you've ever read, how many people here have ever read Guillaume Battista Vico, just out of curiosity? There is one. Well, Guillaume Battista Vico, whom I have only read in English because I don't know enough Italian to read him in the original, and that may give me a warped view because, as somebody said, you can't translate Vico into English. English is an honest language. Vico wrote in the 1720s and 30s, when the Inquisition was still very active. He was accused of heresy several times, but he was never brought before the Inquisition, but he knew they were watching him. So he wrote in a very tricky style. But the major message that seems to come through in Vico's New Science is that civilization was founded by a bunch of sociopaths who figured out a way to enslave other people, and then took an oath among themselves: we will never give up, we will never relent, we will hold these bastards in slavery forever. And that is the main theme of Vico's New Science. I think that's the major theme that Joyce used in Finnegan's Wake, and everybody writes about Vico's cycle theory, which takes up about 20 pages at the end of the book, and is not the most important message in the book, and it's not the message that would interest Joyce. Joyce, as an Irishman born under British dominion, had plenty of chance to study imperialism, oppression, injustice at first hand, being on the receiving end of it. In Joyce's day, he was born in Ireland, but he was a subject of the British Empire. So was everybody else born in Ireland. In Finnegan's Wake, Joyce makes numerous parallels between the Irish, the Hindus, the Chinese, and the Negroes, slaves in the United States, every oppressed group. He unites them all in one cosmic vision of all the people who've been screwed throughout history and the people who have been screwing them all along. And I think that's the major thing Joyce got out of Vico. Sorry, I'm getting serious for a while, but Joyce and Vico are among my preoccupations. My wife used to say that whatever they tell me to talk about when I get in front of an audience, what I actually talk about is what's been going through my head in the last week. And I guess Vico and Joyce have been on my mind a lot in the last week because I'm writing a book about Vico and Joyce. It's also about Ezra Pound and Ernest Fenollosa and Buckminster Fuller and Internet. And it's called The Tale of the Tribe. And don't go running out to try to find it because I haven't finished it yet, much less got it published. What are Yates? Sorry, it's an Aleister Crowley joke and not a very good one, not one of Crowley's better jokes. What if excess of love bewildered them until they died? I write it out in verse, McDonough and McBride, Connolly and Pierce, now and for time to be, wherever the green is worn, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. Okay, that's about all the Yeats I've memorized. No, I could do another bit of Yeats. A statesman is an easy man, he tells his lies by rote. A journalist invents his lies and rams them down your throat. So stay at home and drink your beer and let the neighbors vote. I always thought that was pretty cynical until after I voted for 215 and I found out that voting for propositions does no more good than voting for candidates. If they don't like the way you vote, they just ignore it. But I'm really enjoying this election because it looks like the candidates are going to be Bush and Gore. Everybody in the country knows by now, it's been so widely publicized, that Bush has been lying for years about the extent and duration of his cocaine use. We don't know if he stopped yesterday or he hasn't stopped yet. We don't know when he stopped. He changes his story every time a new witness appears with more evidence that he did it more recently than he admitted yesterday. The same thing with Gore's marijuana use. He keeps changing his story on that, and more witnesses are popping up with more testimony that he didn't stop when the last one he said. He stopped a little bit later, if he did stop at all. So I think this is the first election in which the whole public will know what I have suspected all my life, that the only choice we're offered is between two lying bastards. Now, me and my friends, most of the people I know have known that at least since the 60s. Some of us knew it even before that. But this is the first election in which everybody who still takes the time off from more profitable occupations like blowjobs, art, music, and actually goes out to the polls to vote, everybody, all of these idiots will know they're choosing between two lying bastards. I want to see how they're going to choose between the two lying bastards when they know that's the only choice they got is two lying bastards. I think this should be a really hilarious election, especially since I'm sure Bush and Gore have already worked out a deal that neither one of them will mention the other's drug habits in any of the debates. But the thing is, everybody will know they're avoiding the subject, and all the media will all be asking questions about it, even the corporate media, because the story is too big now to conceal anymore. And of course, it will be all over Internet. Internet is my favorite invention in world history. I like it even better than the wheel. Internet is the only place where we have what Thomas Jefferson thought this country should have. I mean, it's not just this country, it's international. Absolute freedom of expression. Anybody who has a very small amount of money can put up their own website, publish their own views. There's no gatekeeper. When A&E named Gutenberg the man of the millennium, I thought, boy, are they lost. They're back in the dark ages. Gutenberg was very important at one time, but books still had gatekeepers. In the first place, you couldn't get a book published unless a publisher thought they might make some money out of it. In the second place, you couldn't get it circulated unless you lived in a country with less censorship than others, and even in the countries with the least censorship. In the 20th century, any modern scholar, critic, commentator on literature will agree wherever they place them. Among the 10 top books of the century, they would certainly include Joyce's Ulysses and D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover. Both of them were banned in this country Joyce for a decade, Lawrence for about 3 decades. And this, in spite of all my criticism, this is a comparatively free country for books. In the Arab world, getting a book published is much harder, without the government suppressing it, is much harder than here. And there's always been gatekeepers. There is no gatekeeper on internet. Janet Reno, Dianne Feinstein, Orrin Hatch, and a lot of other reactionaries are trying to figure out a way to install a gatekeeper on internet. And you know what? They can't do it. Internet is international. If they find everybody who has a link to a website referring to drugs, which they're trying to do, then everybody will just put the links into places in other countries that don't refer to drugs but have links to sites that refer to drugs. I mean, they can't control the whole world. This is the great joy and paradox and liberation that I see in internet. The only way internet can ever be effectively censored is by a world government. And the people who are most keen on censorship are the ones who are most terrified of a world government. They are the people who think every helicopter they see is the UN scouting out where their troops are going to come in when they invade us. You hear them on the radio, especially in the West where I live. There are these helicopters, black helicopters that fly around, and most people that I know believe it's the DEA looking for large marijuana patches. Some people believe it's the Satanists looking for cattle to mutilate. But an awful lot of people believe it's the UN scouting out the path their invading troops will take when they finally take over this country completely. I mean, the people who most want censorship are the ones who are most opposed to world government. Only world government can ever effectively censor the internet. Ergo, we're never going to have any censorship of the internet. And that to me is the greatest liberation in human history. I lost faith in the corporate media around the same time I lost faith in politics. I guess that was long before the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War just solidified my position. Like Buckminster Fuller, he used to get letters from people who had heard his lectures or read his books and said, run for president, we need you. And Fuller got so many of those letters he made out of formats that he sent out to all of them, in which he explained he was engaged in important work. He couldn't take off 8 years to waste his time in the White House. What the hell can you do in the White House that will really make a difference compared to the difference that internet made, or that Buckminster Fuller's technological innovations have made, or Claude Shannon's master's dissertation in 1940 at MIT, which proved that you can use Boolean algebra to analyze electrical circuits, and you can use electrical circuits to solve problems in Boolean algebra. I don't suppose one internet user out of 10,000 ever heard of that paper, but internet wouldn't exist if Claude Shannon hadn't written that thesis. Claude Shannon and Buckminster Fuller did things much more revolutionary than anybody in the White House. And besides, if you do get yourself locked up in that place, you got to worry all the time that anytime you have a blowjob, kind of star spies might find out about it. But I like Kenneth Starr in one way. He has shown the legal way to publish pornography. All you got, you can even get it published by the United States government printing office. The reason I drink so much water when I'm on stage is that the last hour before I go on, I smoke more than usual, so I end up getting a dry mouth. And the reason I smoke more before I go on is because I get stage fright. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because I read an interview with Laurence Olivier, who's approaching 80, and he confessed he still got stage fright. It seems this is one of those conditions for which there is no cure. Anybody who performs in public, whether they're doing a humorous philosophical rap like me or playing Hamlet, whatever they're doing, there comes a point before they're due to go on when they suddenly get this agonizing doubt. Supposing I get up there and I can't remember a damn thing I was supposed to say. Supposing I just stand there mute looking like a total asshole. What do I do? Supposing I can't think of a single thing to say. Well, you see, that disappears as soon as I get up here. I can think of hundreds of things to say. I already explained the Catholic Church and the Federal Reserve. And Ken Starr. You know, the funniest thing about the Monica Lewinsky case is I don't give a damn how many blowjobs Clinton had or where he had them or what anybody else is doing either. The same thing with our gay citizens. Jerry Falwell has a show which is devoted mostly to persuading people to go out and beat up gay people. I've never, even in my youngest years when I was most ignorant, it never seemed to me that it was my concern what other people were doing with their sex lives. That's their business, not mine. And yet we live in a country in which a large part of the population thinks they got to pass more and more laws to cover more, to forbid more and more types of sexual behavior, to govern more and more people. Well, America is the place that goes in for superlatives. As Bucky Fuller said, to quote my favorite philosopher again, if he was a philosopher, he was more of a scientist. Fuller had a principle about never writing about anything he couldn't prove with a working model, so I guess that means he was never a philosopher. He just sounds like a philosopher at times, but he was a scientist all the time. Bucky Fuller said that the United States of America has devoted most of its energy, its scientific intelligence, its budget, it's put everything it could into one single project for the last 50 years or so, and that is how to deliver more and more explosive power over longer and longer distances in shorter and shorter times to kill more and more poor people. Now, this is a hell of a thing to spend most of the country's resources on, but if they keep at it, they're getting closer. Eventually they'll reach the point where we can kill everybody in 1 nanosecond. And then America will have achieved its historical function, apparently. Then the question is somebody going to press the button, or are we going to say, well, now we got it, now what do we do next for an encore? Which reminds me of my position up here following the wall of vaginas. I'm standing back there, I'm thinking, what the hell do I do for an encore to that? I would like to switch now and talk about the book which has impressed me most in the last year, a book called Saharasia. How many people here have ever heard of Saharasia? Nobody. Good, I can enlighten you all. Saharasia was a PhD dissertation for the University of Kansas by James DeMayo, a geological scientist, his master's dissertation was testing Wilhelm Reich's cloudbuster. And they approved that, believe it or not, although doing research on anything of Reich's is generally forbidden. But the University of Kansas, the committee figured he would refute Reich. When his results confirmed Reich, they told him he couldn't do his PhD on Reich, too. They were afraid he'd confirm even more of Reich. You see, there's many aspects to the Reich case, but one simple way of looking at it is in 1952, Wilhelm Reich was the first one to announce that no peacetime uses of nuclear energy would do the human race any goddamn good at all. Reich predicted wherever we used nuclear energy, there'd be a sharp rise in cancers. And this disturbed a lot of people. I think it disturbed the United States government especially because in 1957 they broke into his laboratory, smashed all of his scientific equipment with axes, took all of his books, magazines, articles, publications, everything he had ever written, and burned them in an incinerator, and then they threw the bastard's ass in jail where he died, to quote E.E. Cummings. And with that degree of scientific refutation, everybody lost interest in Wilhelm Reich. I mean, you can't argue with that kind of scientific proof. The Inquisition settled the Galileo question that way, well, at least in Italy, for at least a few hundred years. But Reich has always haunted me. I grew up on anti-Nazi movies, and to me, one of the things this was before, when I was very young, before the annihilation camps were opened and we learned the full horror. One of the things they stressed in the World War II anti-Nazi movies was the horrible crime against civilization, against humanity, against intellect, in burning books. And I took a very strong imprint on that. I have a very strong bias against people who burn books, magazines, artworks of any sort, scientific papers of any kind. And then 12 years after the war is over, here's the United States government burning books. What the hell? Who won that war? And then we found out about all these radiation experiments the United States has been doing on people. Where the hell was Joseph Mengele in all those missing years? Was he advising the United States government on scientific research? Anyway, DeMayo's PhD dissertation, which grew into the book Saharasia, is about the origins of what he calls armored patrism. I wrote about this a little bit in my book, Ishtar Rising. I read Rat Ray Taylor's Sex and History, in which Rat Ray Taylor listed about 12 variables which seem to go together in a cluster. And these 12 variables are either women have equal status with men or men have superior status. Either sex is accepted and openly enjoyed or sex is forbidden, repressed. And either there's a father god or a mother goddess, and I forget the rest of them. And Rat Ray Taylor called them matrist and patrist. I called them anal patrist and oral matrist, so I could tie Rat Ray Taylor's work in with Freud's. Anybody here read Ishtar Rising? You familiar with any of this? Yeah. Well, what DeMayo did, he took 36 variables. Rat Ray Taylor only had 12. DeMayo took 36 variables, and the two biggest ethnographic atlases ever published. He ran the whole business through computers, and he checked all the cultures of the world for these 36 variables. And he found out where you have more than 5 patrist variables, there's a 95% probability you're going to have the other 31. And wherever you have more than 5 of the matrist variables, there's a 95% probability you're going to have all the others. Among the variables he included, which Rat Ray Taylor didn't include and I didn't include, is genital mutilation. This book is full of maps, which makes it easier to grasp the data. Any place where you find genital mutilation, you're going to find men are superior to women. You're going to find that society is very warlike. You're going to find children are frequently beaten and otherwise abused. You're going to find there's a father god. You're going to find there's a very strict code of morality. You're going to find women are killed for premarital sex. And he's got a whole bunch of he's got 36 of these variables, and they all go together. There are some societies that are mixed, but by and large, most societies on this planet are predominantly patrist or predominantly matrist. Where you find women have a low status, you will find circumcision, you'll find either the boys get their wangs chopped or sub-incised, or the girls get their clitorises removed, or they get their outer labia removed, or they get the outer labia and the inner labia removed, or in some places they get the whole works. The clitoris is cut off, the labia, inner and outer, are both removed, and then the whole thing is sewed up. That's called infibulation. When you find a society like that, you always find they're very warlike. Men have a much higher status than women. Women live basically slave lives. Harems are common, polygamy is common, which means that women are having sex with men they don't really dig, but they're being forced into it. And insult sensitivity is very high. People get killed for insulting one another. And wherever you find the absence of genital mutilation, you generally find men and women are equal. There's hardly any wars. Sometimes there are no wars at all. Rape is unknown, usually, like in the Trobriand Islands. The Zuni Indians can only remember one murder in their whole history. And they only remember that because they're an oral culture. Oral cultures remember things longer than literate cultures. The one murder in Zuni history happened 300 years ago, and the Zunis are still ashamed of it and still don't know why it happened. In the patrist culture of the United States as a whole, I think we have one murder every 7 minutes, if I remember the statistics correctly. And I think we have one rape every 3 minutes. And of course, we have plenty of genital mutilation, although it's only practiced on women by people of Arabian descent. It's practiced on the whole male population by doctors who assure us the procedure is scientific and necessary. No scientific justification for circumcision has ever been published that makes any sense whatsoever. But the thing that DeMayo stresses is the doctors who do the circumcisions hear the baby screaming in agony, and it doesn't register on them. Why? Because they have patrist armored values. They've shut down their own emotions so they can't recognize anybody else's emotions. And infant screaming is just one of the side effects of normal procedure, just like slapping them on the backside right after they're born. Isn't that a great way to join the human race? Now, this patrist, matrist, armored, unarmored, anal, oral, whichever way you want to classify these types of societies, I think it basically goes back to what I wrote about in Prometheus Rising. Right after birth, there's a period of acute imprint vulnerability, which Konrad Lorenz won the Nobel Prize for his writings on imprint vulnerability. There are periods of imprint vulnerability throughout life. There are especially sensitive ones right after birth. Now, you're either going to imprint human beings. I'm combining Timothy Leary and Eric Brynn here, if anybody wants to know where my terminology comes from. You're either going to imprint human beings as warm fuzzies, loving, nurturing, supporting critters that you can trust and love and who love you, or you're going to imprint them as cold pricklies, hostile, vicious, dangerous characters that you want to have as little to do with as possible. Obviously, the maximum cold, prickly imprint means a totally autistic child, or else one that grows up to be a criminal sociopath. Those with a warm, fuzzy imprint are the ones who grow up to be friendly, generous, outgoing, full of humor, nice people in general, the kind of people you wish all your neighbors were. I think that, to quote Leary again, the essence of evolutionary intelligence is to find the proper habitat. The thing to do is to live where you're surrounded by warm fuzzies instead of where you're surrounded by cold pricklies. And it's quite obvious. You can tell almost, just in a few minutes conversation, you can tell whether the person you're talking to has imprinted humans as warm fuzzies or as cold pricklies. And if they have imprinted human beings as cold pricklies, you will find that they grew up in a culture or a subculture in which genital mutilation probably exists. If it doesn't, other forms of brutality to children exist. But beating children is common. But usually you do find some kind of genital mutilation. The slap in the backside right after birth greets them, so they know right away they're surrounded by cold pricklies. Who the hell would hit a helpless infant at a time like that when they're just born? How can these fucking doctors do it? Well, as Wilhelm Reich said, nobody can recognize an emotion in others unless they've experienced it themselves. Most doctors in this patristic and armored anal society cannot recognize the sadistic things they're doing because they don't recognize the pain expressed by the people who suffer it because they have armored themselves so much they don't have any emotions left at all. Isn't this an extreme, paranoid, crazy view? No wonder they burned Reich's books. They're probably going to burn DeMayo's book as soon as they find it. Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. Maybe I'm just hastening the day when the government comes and burns that book too. One of the fascinating things about Saharasia is he uses 36 variables and compares 1,200 different cultures. This is probably the biggest cross-cultural study ever done in one book. And he documents all of the correlations very, very carefully. As a matter of fact, the book is rather boring because it's so goddamn carefully documented and all the evidence is laid out before you because he knows how much hostility this is going to arise, so he's protected himself as much as any scientific heretic can by piling on the documentation. We got 1,200 cultures, and they all follow the general laws he lays down. He lays down the laws he deduced by studying these 1,200 cultures. And all of the armored patristic cultures all originated within the deserts of North Africa, the Middle East, or Asia, or clearly can be shown to have been influenced by invaders from that area. Now, that area was not always a desert. Before 4000 BCE, that area was a lush, verdant jungle, just like the rest of, like the central part of Africa. Around 4000 BC up to 3500 BC and after, but especially in that 500-year period, the vegetation died, the whole place turned into deserts. There must have been massive starvation. There was massive fleeing from there. And now one of the effects of starvation is not only that people die, but that the survivors suffer brain damage. This has been demonstrated repeatedly in studies. If you go through a long period of malnutrition, this is especially true of infants. An infant that doesn't get fed properly during its first year is very, very likely to suffer some kind of permanent brain damage. This is not anti-LSD propaganda. This has been well documented about what happens if kids aren't fed properly. Of course, the best food for children, for newborns, is mother's milk, which again we notice most patrist cultures try to evade one way or another. Throughout the United States today, the majority of people still give the children an artificial formula in a bottle instead of giving them the mother's breast. That interferes with the mother-child bonding right away, just like separating the child from the mother right after birth, which is done in most hospitals. Now, there are people who deliver children in the natural, wholesome way, in which the child is not banged around right after birth and is put on the mother's breast and they form a loving bond right away. This is the midwife movement, and the United States government is waging war on that, too, which is part of the whole patristic armored structure of our culture. My wife, Arlen, used to say, getting back to the piss police, she used to say, if a drug can be proven to be cheap, effective, and non-monopolizable, it will also be illegal. And check that out for yourself. See if you can think of any drug that's cheap. You can grow it in your backyard. It's effective. It really works, and nobody can monopolize it. It's always illegal. The only legal drugs in the society are the ones that are monopolized, high-priced, and generally damn near toxic, like AZT, for instance, which kills more of the patients than it helps, according to a hell of a lot of statistical studies. The number of people who die from prescription drugs every year runs into the hundreds of thousands. The number of people who die from vitamin C every year, so far, all the data collected is 0. Nobody has ever died from. So guess what the government is trying to ban next? Vitamin C. If they can't ban it, they've tried to ban it, that failed. Now they got a new program. They're trying to persuade us that it should be controlled, so you got to go to a doctor and get a prescription for vitamin C. That's still endangering the profession, because if you take more, the more vitamin C you take, the less likely you are to develop any major illness. And if you do develop a major illness, the more likely you are to throw it off. If you don't throw it off, the more likely you are to live a long time after getting the major illness. There's plenty of statistics to back this up. You'll find them in the writings of Linus Pauling, who the only man who ever won the Nobel Prize twice. And so the government wants to, so if they can't stop people from taking vitamin C, they want you at least to go to a doctor and get a prescription, so the doctor gets a cut on the profit, so you can't get the low price you got before you had it. I mean, you go to a doctor, it's going to cost you over $100 anywhere in the country for an office visit, right? So you got to pay $100 before you can even go and buy the goddamn vitamin C. Well, some people still believe in the AMA. Some people still believe in the government, the lying bastards. And some people believe the piss police are necessary, and some people believe the Federal Reserve really does have a magic wand which turns their paper into money and everybody else's paper is just shit. By the way, if Andy Warhol, Andy used to keep a pantry full of Campbell's soup cans, and if he liked you, he'd autograph one, and you had a genuine, authentic Warhol of your very own. I think that's a beautiful. It's really breaking down the false barrier between art and life. What he should have done, if he had lived longer, he would have thought of it as to sue Campbell's Soup for selling cheap imitation Warhols. But if Andy Warhol found $1 on the sidewalk and put a frame around it and called it found art, I don't know what it would be worth, but let's say at minimum 100,000, maybe $1 million. I don't know what Warhols are going for now. Now, how does it change from being worth $1 to $1 million just because Warhol put a frame around it? Well, because he's got the status in the art community. But would it make any difference at all whether the dollar he found was printed by the Federal Reserve or by the mafia or by you and me in our basements? I don't know, would it? I don't know. Money is the Schrodinger's cat of economics. Then there was Timothy Leary. How much time I got? Timothy Leary did a lot of research with psilocybin and LSD, and he supervised research done by others at Harvard. In one experiment, they took a bunch of convicts who were due for release soon. They gave them psilocybin with music and mystical readings and a whole bunch of re-imprinting techniques. And Leary's criteria for this experiment was, where are the bodies in space-time 1 year after release from prison? Throughout the United States, the average answer is 95% of them are back in prison after 1 year. That's the recidivism rate runs 95% on average, lower in some states than others, but it averages out to 95%. So Leary said, we're not going to talk about neuroses, psychoses, sociopathic personality, any of that jargon. Where are the bodies in space-time? 1 year after Leary's research, 95% of his convicts were still out on the outside. They had jobs, they were doing something or other. They were not back in prison. Well, this threatened the whole goddamn police state and the whole goddamn prison business, so of course they stopped the research. Meanwhile, Leary did another study, or he supervised a study by Andrew Weil, in which a bunch of theology students were given LSD on Good Friday in a church. Some of them got LSD, some of them got an active placebo, which made their skin tingle a little, so they thought they got something or other. And then the reports of what they experienced were compared by another group of theology students according to their definition of mystic experience. And it turned out that more than 2/3 of the ones who got the psilocybin had mystical experiences, and none of the others had mystical experiences at all, thereby proving that a chemical can induce a mystical experience, which should not surprise anybody with a scientific education, because all of our psychological, psychosomatic, visionary, etc. experiences are mediated by the chemistry of the brain. What you're thinking or feeling at any given moment depends on what chemicals are running through your brain. Mashed potatoes are just as psychedelic as LSD, except in a different way. If you've ever gone from an omnivorous diet to a vegetarian diet, you'll notice your whole reality tunnel changed. If you've ever gone from a vegetarian diet back to an omnivorous diet, your reality tunnel changes again. I've been through both of those experiences, and I speak from experience. Everything that gets into your brain affects your reality tunnel, your worldview, or your belief system, which I abbreviate BS. The three major things I've been trying to teach in all of my books is never believe fully in anybody else's BS. I don't care if it's Rajneesh, the Pope, L. Ron Hubbard, Al Gore, George Bush, or I don't care who it is. Don't swallow all their belief system totally. Don't accept all of their bullshit, all their BS. The second rule is like unto the first. Don't believe totally in your own BS, which means that, as Bucky Fuller said, universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events. Non-simultaneously. Universe consists of non-simultaneously apprehended events, which means any belief system or reality tunnel you've got right now is going to have to be revised and updated as you continue to apprehend new events later in time, not simultaneously. This is the natural functioning of the human brain. It's the way children's brains perform before they're wrecked by the school system. It's the way the minds of all great scientists and artists work. But once you have a belief system, everything that comes in either gets ignored if it doesn't fit the belief system, or it gets distorted enough so that it can fit into the belief system. You got to be continually revising your map of the world, or you'll lose more and more contact with reality. Anybody who has a belief system which covers the whole universe, that would be the Roman Catholics, Orthodox Islam, the Scientologists, PsyCop, the Marxists, the objectivists, and most of the assholes you meet on the street. What has happened is their brain has stopped receiving new signals. Or to the extent that new signals do get in, they all have to be edited to fit into the belief system. If they don't fit the belief system, they get repressed one way or another, like the doctors can't hear the baby screaming while they circumcise them. I lost track of where I was going with that thought. You know, I found a new way to get high and stay spaced out for hours on end, and the government can't stop me. It's called senility. Yeah, really. There are four major signs of this. One is increase of long-term memory. I can walk to the kitchen, and on that walk, I can remember things that went on in kindergarten, including a fight I had with a kid named Billy Batson who had blonde hair. I remember the blonde hair as well as the name. I remember another fight I had with a kid named Alan Smith. I remember there was a girl in my class named Ursula Yard who had very black hair, but chiefly I remember her because the name Ursula Yard seemed like a character out of Dickens. I thought it was a wonderful name. And I can remember all those other things like that going. I can remember things happened when I was 2 years old. And the second effect of senility is that when I get to the kitchen, I can't remember what I was going there for. And I forget what the third one is. And the fourth one is I don't give a fuck anymore. As you can see by the things I've been saying tonight. Actually, I've been saying daring, satirical, sarcastic, sardonic, subversive, and dangerous things for a long time, but I'm getting much more uninhibited since my wife died. I suddenly realized if they throw me in jail, nobody's going to be hurt but me. And what the hell does it mean at my age? At my age, nobody's going to want to rape me. I'm not the, they like young boys. So what does it mean if they throw me in jail? You know what it means? I get X number of years, let's say 5. I get 5 years of free lodging, free food, and free medical care. That's another of the wonderful things about this country that makes us unique. Every other country in the industrial world, and several countries in the not yet industrial world, Mexico, Costa Rica, quite a few of them, have national health plans in which everybody gets the medical attention they need, whether they can afford it or not. In this country, there are only 2 groups that are guaranteed medical attention, whether they can afford it or not. And they are the 2 professional criminal classes. That's the members of Congress and the people in our prisons. If you're in prison, you get all the medical care you need, whether you can pay for it, and the same thing in Congress. I don't know why the hell our society decided that only the nefarious felons should get free medical treatment and the rest of us can starve to death on the sidewalk outside the hospital without any treatment at all. But that's the kind of fucking crazy country we live in, isn't it? And while I'm fucking and all throwing around words like that, I suddenly remembered George Carlin, he's my favorite philosopher. And I thought I would quote one of my favorite all-time lines from George Carlin. Why is it that all the women you see at anti-abortion rallies look like nobody would want to fuck them in the first place? I've noticed that for years, but it never came to consciousness until Carlin said it. By the way, Carlin not only has given countless hours of amusement and relief, he gives relief as well as amusement. There's a great relief in hearing somebody say on television the things that we're all thinking that we can never get into the mass media. Carlin has wormed his way in through years and years of building up his fan club to where HBO lets him on once a year and he can do his uncensored act just the way he does it on stage. And I really admire that. It took him years, it took him decades to get there, but now he can get up on television and say things like I just said, and that's a wonderful achievement. And the other thing, it's a great relief because we all suffer from a constant, not all of us, I mean just the people in this audience, I mean the people like us, our kind of people. We all suffer from this constant frustration that 99% of what we say can never be expressed in any of the major media. Carlin was a major relief. We could listen to him and say, by God, somebody actually said it and they didn't shoot him, they didn't hang him, they didn't cut his head off, they didn't throw him in boiling oil. There is some freedom of speech. Now with internet, we can all do it. We can't do it in a major media, but when you put up a website, you don't know how many people are going to look at it. 10, 1,000, 1 million, 20 million, you never know. Put up a website, you can say any goddamn thing you want. You can call. When I revise, I've been doing this in my email for the last couple of weeks. When I update my website, I'm going to put it in there too. I'm continually referring all through this year to the 2 leading candidates, if they turns out to be them, as the 2 lying bastards. I hope if I keep this on my website long enough, it'll get picked up. And if I got about 10 other lecture gigs this year, with which I'm going to use that. I hope eventually the whole country will get into the habit of referring to Gore and Bush as the 2 lying bastards. I think that would be a great triumph for sanity and a victory over horseshit. And having been a member of the I used to be a member of the Neo-American Church. Oh, that's what that means? Oh, he was making obscene gestures at me, and I thought he wanted me to go to bed with him, and I did, Now he's telling me to wrap it up. Let's see, I did Saharasia, I did the AMA, or I did them in the eye. I did the Federal Reserve. I talked about the 2 lying bastards. What can I do to wrap all this up? Maybe. Oh, well, you see, De Selby is a character in a novel by Flann O'Brien, and I admired, it's a novel called, as a matter of fact, he's in 2 novels by Flann O'Brien, but the one I love the best is The Third Policeman. And I couldn't resist putting he's only in the footnotes to that book. I put him in the footnotes to one of my novels. Then I started thinking, that's a tribute to Flann O'Brien. If a movie director does that, it's called an homage. You can lift all you want from Hitchcock, and it's called an homage to Hitchcock. You can lift anything you want from Orson Welles, it's an homage to Orson Welles. But in the literary world, that idea hasn't gotten across so much. I suddenly got afraid I might hear from the Flann O'Brien's estate someday. Fortunately, that book went out of print, and de Selby disappeared from my writings. He has been replaced by somebody of my own creation who has something similar with de Selby, but is uniquely himself. That's Professor Timothy F.X. Finnegan of the Sir Miles Nagopoline, Royal Sir Miles Nagopoline Astroanomalistic Society in Dalkey, just south of Dublin. And Professor Finnegan was the one who, by computer enhancement, proved that the face on Mars is Mo Howard, which thereby shows that Mo has had an influence on at least 2 planets. Since the Three Stooges went on television about 30 years ago, their old movies started getting reshown. Up to 30 light years away, Mo may be getting recognized on more and more planets where there are intelligent entities. Mo is the sort of the synecdoche or epiphany or ideogram, or he is the central image of patristic values. Mo is responsible for the ideas that if somebody doesn't understand something quickly enough, hit them over the head and they'll understand then. Or if they don't do what you want them to do, stick your finger in their eye. And he taught a lot of other lessons like that. He was also one of the funniest men who ever lived, I think. But besides that, Professor Finnegan founded the CSICON, the Committee for Surrealist Investigation of Claims of the Normal, of which I am the American CEO. We are offering $1 million to anybody who can produce a totally normal human being, or an average sunset, or a typical Beethoven symphony, or an average playmate of the month. We want something that's totally average in all respects. It can't be found. It only exists in mathematical abstraction. As Joyce said, the state is concentric, but the individual is eccentric. Nobody is quite the well-regulated robot our leaders want us to be. And I guess that leads up, we're not talking any more about Professor Finnegan's great discoveries. I think I will close up with my latest thoughts about the lying bastards. They are spying on us more and more. They're snooping on us more and more. They're stealing more and more of our property all the time. They don't even have to prove we're guilty of a crime. They just have to accuse us. They could take our houses, our cars, our boats, any damn thing we own, our computers, anything. And we're getting more and more recalcitrant, which means that makes them nervous, so they're spying on us more and more and worrying about us. I think the only solution to the American political problem is if the government goes somewhere else, finds a more docile and submissive people and governs them and leaves us the fuck alone. And thank you very much.
And we're back, people. Robert Anton Wilson, strange stream of consciousness lecture. And I'm apologizing, I guess, because of the vulgarity. If you're a person that's sensitive to those things, I'm very sorry. It was unfiltered, unscreened, really is the thing. And honest. It's honestly Robert Anton Wilson. That's his vibe. Now you know. So that's where he's at. It was a solid hour, though. He did touch on a lot of incredible topics, really skimmed over a lot of things, but went in his stream of consciousness into some deep dives. Brynn, did you survive that? Are you scarred? I'm sorry.
It was probably our most crass lecture I think we've ever listened to. I guess it wins the award for that.
I'm sorry. Hopefully. Holy shit. I'm just glad you survived. You know, there's a little heat in some of the comedy, right? It's just like comedy. It's like comedy, right?
Yeah, you know.
Okay. You know, that's what I get for just being raw. Get it? Robert Anton Wilson. He's who he is, and that's his energy.
Dude is raw.
There it is. Interestingly, because This lecture is from the year 2000. There were so many 2000s era cultural topics that he kept touching on American presidential elections, other things which were really, really interesting. But I thought that was kind of a cool little footnote to the whole thing. But wow.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought, wait, which presidential election is he about to talk about? Or when he's talking about like, oh, the internet, like, it was brand new. It was, 5 years old at that time?
Barely, yes.
So yeah, that was interesting just as like a little marker of time space to see where he was coming from. His humor was clearly very United States mid-'80s.
Very of its era.
Of its era, for sure.
And again, I mean, the year 2000 was 25 years ago. 25 years ago. It just seems like yesterday. But he said things. I remember when they were trying to make vitamin C only available in America by prescription. That didn't fly, of course, later, but that reminded me of that. But he just really touched on a lot of general ideas that are central in a way to the counterculture mindset. Or you could say the occult intellectual mindset of the era. So many different potential ideas, but like he said, he never really settles on a certain point. He just realizes that all of it could be a potential, and to just examine each situation and all of the information as it comes. That was his style. I loved his concept of the reality tunnel, and then understanding your own BS, your own belief system, and don't get caught up too much in other people's BS belief systems, because they may not be yours and they may not be fully authentic, right?
Yeah, those were my two favorite takeaways, was the personal belief system, or the BS, and the reality tunnel. And that also you're in a space wherever you are with everyone's concurrent reality tunnels all crossing streams, which is, what's happening, but interesting to think about in that terminology.
Yes.
Do a little visualization.
Yes. And he, again, had some things that he was talking about that was very dated to the year 2000 in that era. Of course, medical cannabis has come a long way. He was just talking about how that had been recently in his time, that era, that 2000 time, recently legalized, and how people were still getting persecuted 25 years later, my friend Robert. We've come a long, long way. I wonder what he would think about how things are today with the legalization of even psychedelics. He threw in there at the beginning how he channeled something from Sirius. He had some situation where he had contact with a Syrian, the star system Sirius intelligence, a Syrian intelligence. I want to look into that more. I've heard that. I've read him talk about that. It was in the Chapel Perilous book a little bit. But I want to take the deep dive on that. We'll revisit that one on another episode. But always revising your perspective. Always revising, as he says, your map of the world. People, new information is always presenting itself. Constantly, every second, you could say. You have to be open to change. There's one constant, they say, it's change. The other constant, I would say, is that we're alive. Everything else
is up for debate.
Exactly. So that's the point. So all of it is valid, is firmly, as you might believe something, as deep as you think the truth might be. You have to always leave an aperture open, just a little bit open, for the potential that it could change. Superposition. You're not a 1, you're not a 0, you're in superposition. It's a quantum state. It's a good state to be in, because in that place of infinite potential, that's where all the information, the true information, exists. It's all a matter of perceptions and perceptions change, right? Because very quickly, I just want to point out, never, ever, if you've noticed, if you're a longtime listener, we don't really do politics. We don't do 3D politics. We're very, we include the 3D. Anyways, just want to highlight that his concerns about the political events of his time, that 2000 time, have shifted and changed. And all of the energy and the attachments and the things that he felt as a person to those things during that time don't even exist anymore. So that energy, was it validly used? Was it wasted? That's not for me to decide. But I'm just trying to bring awareness to the fact that everything's constantly changing. We have this very, very brief time in this dimension, and how our energy is used, where we put it, what we connect with is so important. It's so important to be aware of what's going on and how it's being pushed and pulled. We have one mission, people. We've got to make this place heaven on earth. We can do it, but it's going to take using our manifestation abilities, truly using our creative powers. And in order to use that creative power, we need a strong reservoir. It's infinite, but we need it strong. We need it readily available if it's getting sucked dry or constantly pulled in different directions. Based on all these very temporal situations that are very, let's just say it, 3D matrix based, then maybe that's slowing us down. Maybe that's keeping us from doing the thing that we're supposed to do. Just speculation, just a thought, but just something I thought I'd want to bring to your attention, oh listener that I love so much. Brynn, what do you think about all that?
I think that is some solid, not necessarily advice, but a solid perspective to bring. That things that seem so important and dire in the 3D world in the moment end up just poofing away and on to the next thing. And of course, I mean, there are reasons and ethics and all sorts of things that you get involved in your lifetime, in your place, and all of that. But yeah, I think a lot of the things that we get wrapped up in end up not really being much in the bigger picture, and they're kind of distracting us from our bigger mission, which is the heaven on earth situation.
Exactly. It's not that those situations don't have some validity if they're not propagandized. Let's say these situations have validity and they exist, they're real. I'm not saying don't let yourself understand them energetically. I'm just saying, let's look at what's temporal, what's happening that's affecting us energetically, and perhaps shift those things so we can utilize that energy to keep this thing moving forward. And so many of my guests have said that the reason those draining things exist, those draining forces that shows up in various ways, so many different ways, is to keep you as a person from manifesting those things, from achieving your great purpose, your great goal. So all food for thought, stimulated by this incredibly strange, funny, vulgar, and very real conversation from Robert Anton Wilson. Look, I didn't agree with every single thing that he said. Just putting it out there. No. I want to put that on the record. I mean, he seemed to still have that kind of anger towards organized religion, and not just understanding that, yes, there have been crimes committed in the name of organized religion, but within that, there was some truth, and the people that committed those crimes need to be punished, and there's no excusing that. But we have to understand that all of this is part of some story. So we have to be real about situations, but we also can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. I don't know who threw their child out with bathwater, but
yeah, how did that become a cliche saying? That's kind of interesting.
And one last thing I'd just like to touch on is that he brought up something that is very present now in 2025. People are talking about this birth trauma related to things like, for males, circumcision, and how that affects people as you're coming into this dimension. You get this chunk of your flesh cut off. You know, just looking at it from an abstract point of view, you get this chunk of your flesh cut off by this strange being that you just now interface with your eyes opening into this world. And how to undo that trauma. That seems to be a big thing right now. And he touched on that. So it must have been in the minds of the people then.
Yeah, I think right actually around 2000 was a new uptick in the natural birth and sort of undoctoring of the newborn and the mother. And I mean, it really came about in the late 60s and early 70s. There was a huge home birth movement, and it seems like it happens in waves like that. And then it kind of goes back down. And then right around, I feel like that 2000 to 2010, there was a huge resurgence, and hospitals began having birthing centers, and circumcision began to be questioned in probably a more mainstream fashion than it ever had. And maybe it had something to do with the internet and people being able to post their experiences or actually post the procedure. Maybe no one had really ever read about it before or thought about it that deeply. And then, you know, of course it catches on. And so I think, yeah, maybe he was kind of in the beginning of that conversation that was happening.
Yes. And like you said, as we close this episode, people found out about that because of the internet, perhaps then. And he was very in love with the internet, as you can see how much it's affected humanity. And still to this day, unless you're in China or North Korea, there's still no gatekeeper on the internet. It is still a place where people can express themselves freely, for better or for worse. It's still there to this day as a place to do that. We can never let that go. We always have to have a place where people can express themselves freely, not doing anything criminal, of course, but expressing themselves freely with no gatekeeper, as he was saying. The publishers, the history of all of that, all the different hoops you had to jump through to get your information out there back in the day. That is all gone. And I will say to this day in 2025, it is still that way. And that is how we are able to do this podcast. Midnight on Earth, unfiltered, uncensored, free. We are a free people here all over the world. The light beings that are interfacing it. We are all free in this internet dimension. Brynn, did you have anything else to say before we go?
I was just thinking how Robert Anton Wilson is still on the internet. I wonder if he was thinking about that back when he was giving his lecture, how he would still be giving that lecture right now, 25 years later, and anyone could find it.
Exactly. Digitized for all time thanks to the internet. Wow. So even in that way, it's preserving a presence. It's preserving something, digitizing. Wow. So here we are in 2025, people. 2025, we're still alive. It's our time to thrive.
Keep doing that jive.
There you go, people. All right. VitalForceHerbs.com. Robert Anton Wilson. We took the deep dive. Gabriel Kennedy, the biography, Chapel Perilous. We had a Robert Anton Wilson moment. We're going to pivot to an incredible guest next week. And we will see you next week. Midnight on Earth.